what do you have to say about vaccine shortages? And I ask you this at a time when the High Court in Delhi has been absolutely merciless in actually its assessment of the government's, the central government's vaccine rollout management. The Delhi High Court said that some people should be charged with manslaughter for not tapping the vaccine manufacturer's potential. They said there was palpable disquiet in the country, and they also said that this was a tearing emergency. And I can tell you, Dr. Tyagarajan, the villages even in Tamil Nadu that I have been to, the rural villages. I was in Hosur, I was in Salem. They say that villagers are scared to travel to the towns and cities to get a vaccine, and they say the villages don't have enough vaccines. Now, what are states doing about this, and how do you see those comments from the Delhi High Court that some people should be charged with manslaughter?
Look, whenever I speak my mind, I get a bit in trouble, so I'm trying to be very diplomatic today.
No, please don't be diplomatic. Please don't be diplomatic. Please don't be diplomatic. Yeah.
Okay, let me be as technical and as calm as possible. Let me break it into two different pieces. The first is, were you to have vaccines, how quickly can you administer them and can you get them to the rural areas? Again, I say, what we learned in Madurai is that a distributed strategy works. Forget the vaccines. Even for treatment, had we been waiting to have people come to the government hospital in the city, we would have created a kind of explosion of cases because we would have had transmission between the rural and the urban areas. See, containing something in urban is quite easy. You have good infrastructure. You have good mechanisms to track. The spread is wild because the density of population is high. But tracking, treatment is easy. Infection is easy. The ambulance can get there in 10 minutes. Once the spread crosses that tipping point and goes to the rural areas, you're in serious trouble because you don't have connectivity of infrastructure, you don't have connectivity of ambulance, you don't have medical services, etc. So we took a conscious strategy, Minister, Commercial Tax Minister and Registration Department Minister P. Murthy and I, that we would go distribute it from day one. So what that meant was we ended up taking every primary health center. Now we are in Tamil Nadu. The Dravidian model has given us some advantages. We have lots of doctors, we have lots of primary health centers, we have lots of nurses. So we dispatched and we said every panchayat, every township, every district union, we must have capacity. We must do testing there, we must do vaccination there, we must have 10 to 50 beds starting with the village to the union where we can have a medical nurse and a practitioner on call, and we can do basic, anything that is not required oxygen will be in that area and they will never need to come to the city. And then we set up to expand the second government hospital in Topur, which was a rural kind of a, British days set up for infectious diseases, remote kind of open 100-acre little buildings place. We went and had the sponsors come and create 400 extra oxygen beds with tent city-like situations. And so, we focused on the one hand, strengthening infrastructure, on the other hand, distributing the reach of all of these things. And my colleague Murthy had an even better idea. He said, why should we come to the village office or the panchayat or the Anganwadi or the noon meal scheme, which is not working now, where we set the beds? He says, let us go survey them at the homes. So we got self-help groups, the women's self-help groups. We got 3,800 and something women. And the government paid them to go and actually survey every house and find people with symptoms before they came to us and bring them to the village areas and get them treated there itself. Paper on this. But my instinct is that the smart thing we did was for local self-governance, local administration down to COVID and get this taken. This is one half of the equation. Now let's go back to the other half of the equation. We have the exact opposite situation when it comes to vaccines. We don't have a free market. A free market is where there are many buyers, many sellers. There's no price maker, and supply and demand determines fluctuating prices. It's an open, normal, functioning, efficient market. We don't have that. We have structural problems. We have authorities like the Union Government of India that decides which vaccine is acceptable and not. We have authorities, we have monopoly or monopsony kind of buying, selling situations. In fact, right now we have oligopoly. There are only 3 manufacturers who sell vaccines that we can buy. Now, if you make it a free-for-all and say, 32 states go and bid, you see what has happened. The rich states of Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu have been able to float global tenders, though they have not been filled. But the other states don't have the money to do that. So realistically, when you have an oligopoly situation where only 2 or 3 manufacturers exist, the smart way is to have a monopsony buyer like the government of India, who can then have greater power than the oligopoly suppliers, buy everything at a fixed price and distribute it to the rest of the system. So that is how it is supposed to work. Now all of a sudden you have the Union Government of India, which otherwise satellite on everything. One nation, one strategy, one policy, one label, everything one nation. No, take care of vaccines yourself.
How does that
even clearer perspective? We used to buy drugs like remdesivir. We had purchase orders that we were buying for. Those purchase orders were annulled and taken over by the central government, saying that we will be the integrator and distributor, integrator of purchases and distributor of medicine. How is it that the same government that took monopoly control of a monopoly equivalent for medicine tells the states to go and be independent buyers? And on what basis morally does it sanction the manufacturers to charge 3 different prices to 3 different classes of buyers? This is not a situation where you're protecting the 2 manufacturers. They are not, at least one of them is only on patent. They're not even an original intellectual property manufacturer. They're replicating the AstraZeneca patent. So if they can sell to the government of India at 100, we are allowed to sell to the states and private parties at different prices. It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
So are you saying that a better model would have been for the center to be responsible for all of the procurement? And I want to add another question. You see, a few months ago, it seemed that the vaccine rollout was a highly centralized program. So I remember when Maharashtra wanted to do door-to-door inoculations, the center actually said no. Now it's gone completely the other way, where the states have been left to fend for themselves. You have foreign companies like Pfizer and Moderna refusing to engage with the states directly. And as you said, other states don't necessarily have the resources or the money. If you had to construct an ideal model, would you say that the center needs to take responsibility? And 2, you did not comment on the Delhi High Court's comments that the vaccine rollout is so inefficient that some people need to be charged with manslaughter. These are the Delhi High Court's words, not mine.
Yeah, listen, it's easy for what we used to call in the trading business talking your own book. So if I say something that's already naturally in my interest to say, it shouldn't carry a whole lot of weight. So of course I'm not opposed to the Delhi court's thinking, but that's not rocket science, or it doesn't enlighten the debate. Let me answer a couple of other questions that you asked very clearly. I think the government of India should do monopoly procurement of 100% of the production of the Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech and Sputnik manufacturing. Number 1. My best information is, were they to do that, they can procure up to a couple of 100 million or slightly more than 200 million doses a month at the fixed rate that the government sets. Number 2, should all the other vaccines have got approval from the FDA, the European regulators, those should be used here as well. I've gone through this process somewhere else. When you have allowed Bharat Biotech to do Covaxin without stage 3 trials, why do you now insist on additional trials for the sake of Pfizer and Moderna, which have already gone through trials in other countries? Again, it's this lack of consistency in logic, black for you, white for me, that really boggles the mind. Number 2. Number 3, and that comes to the key point, having acquired and distributed them in a way that you see fair, based on population ratios, based on whatever you see fair, come out of the way of implementation and not require that 100% of the vaccine registration should be done a Government of India database, which rural villagers can, as you said, villagers in rural areas cannot access. At least in Tamil Nadu, we have very high penetration even in villages. But many parts of India, they don't have internet in the villages. How will villages in Bihar and UP register for vaccination? Government of India website, and why should they? Right? So this logic that says, you buy but I will administer makes no sense. The logic that says, I buy and I will administer makes no sense, because they've seen it fail in Swachh Bharat, Kalyan and all, where they collect the cells, but they can't make sure it actually gets implemented. They don't have the actual implementation infrastructure. So a logical union government should acquire as a monopoly buyer, almost as a by law monopoly buyer from every user possible, distribute it to the states as they see fit in fair, and then allow the states to operate as they see fit with their capabilities. It is not a complicated model. It is a simple black and white model that can be implemented today and produce fantastic results. After all, the government of India, in the budget, the Honorable Union Finance Minister said that they have allocated 35,000 crores for vaccine procurement. At 100 rupees a dose, that is 350 crore doses. 350 crore doses is more than enough to vaccinate everybody in India twice. So I don't understand where the complexity comes from.
Let me ask you this. That was very clear. But what is the biggest challenge or the difficulty that you face as a state representative today in dealing with the center on this COVID crisis? Do you feel that the Prime Minister and the Chief Ministers are all on one word? In the past, in other public statements, you have criticized the Prime Minister's communication on this pandemic. You have said, firstly, it's not clear. Secondly, you have you have raised the issue of being a Tamilian and having to listen to a national leader in Hindi, saying that most people don't get it. In terms of center-state synergy, where do we stand right now? You've made some scathing comments on the GST Council being, for example, a rubber stamp. But in terms of the federal spirit in handling this crisis, is it alive or is it dying?
Well, let me break that into three clear parts. It's not my role to interact with the center as far as COVID is concerned, so I don't want to comment on it. It's the health minister and the chief minister who do those interactions. I don't want to comment on what they experience or not, number one. Number two, I did not mean any disrespect. I was asked a question, what do you think of the Prime Minister's speeches? I said, I can't understand them. They are in Hindi. And since I can't understand them, I don't listen to them. I read the newspaper the next what he has said. It is a simple, it is not intended to be kind of adversarial, it's not intended to be what can I say? I can't understand how many people spend 20 minutes in front of a TV trying to listen to something in a language they don't understand. I'm shocked why that became news. If I can't understand, of course I don't listen to it. I go read the paper, the next day somebody has translated for me what the message was. Now come to the separate, are state-center relations at a bit of a kind of impasse? And the answer is yes. And that was before GST, but GST has certainly exacerbated it. And just I'm a finance minister, let me stick to my portfolio. On my portfolio, I'll give you 3 or 4 reasons why. Over the last 6-7 years, the amount of taxation that the center puts into cesses and doesn't divide with the states has gotten very high. And therefore, we're getting less and less of our share. Over the years, the amount of constraints and regulations the center puts on the state in its own finances has gotten very high. For example, they now say that somebody like the World, we are happy to work with, we have a long history. They say the World Bank can only do one project. Now, the World Bank will go wherever it can get work done. And if Tamil Nadu has 3 good projects, the World Bank is willing to finance that. But the center says no. Now, you have, for various reasons, they have constraints on how much you can borrow. So effectively what I'm saying is they behave like a big brother and don't allow us to function to our potential talent. Now you bring in issues like the GST Council, which were ill-formed, are constitutionally kind of amorphous and not yet clear after 3-4 years of implementation exactly what should or shouldn't happen. And then what was the nature of the contractual or the legal obligation for that center anyways? Then they say, no, you won't borrow. Then they say, no, you borrow. No, it was meant to be a grant, but then we'll borrow and lend it to you back to back. So I'm saying that the nature of, relationships don't break or don't get frayed by one issue, right? Just like human relationships, state-to-state relationships get affected by a gradual progression of a series of issues. And at this point, I would say that we reached a point where the center has an enormous amount of authority and control, much more so than at any point in India's history or potentially any institution, but doesn't really have compassion or the kind of with it. And so we find ourselves at this impasse, is my personal kind of feeling based on the events of the last, let's say, few years.
Yeah.